Hey, and welcome back to Braver by the Day. This is episode 27. For today's show notes, braverbytheday.com/27. Today's an awesome episode. I'm joined by Elliott Hulse. You'll find out a little bit more about who Elliott is in the episode. He's quite well known online. He's an absolute champ. Super, super nice too. He just blew me away with how nice and how honest he is. Just one thing for today's episode. There is some adult language in this episode, so if you're offended at all by adult language, I would skip this episode maybe, and I'll see you in episode 28. If not, I think you're really, really going to enjoy this episode. It's one of my favourites out of all of the episodes that I've done so far. Elliott was just so nice and funny and eloquent, so I won't hold you up too much. We'll jump in now with Elliott Hulse, and let's go for it. So welcome back, everyone, to Braver by the Day. This is episode 27. Today, I'm super, super honoured to be joined by probably my only personal fitness hero, and I know my housemate Jack. It's one of his heroes full stop, and that's Elliott Hulse from St. Petersburg in Florida in the USA. You might know Elliott from hulsestrength.com and or his incredibly popular StrengthCamp YouTube channel. So Elliott's a professional strength trainer, a business owner, a bit of a YouTube titan and a speaker. But the main reason that I wanted to get Elliott on the call for me today is that he was probably the first person in the fitness world that I gravitated to, because he embraces learning and thinking, and he's a book lover and obviously a very hard worker because his body is chiseled, but still he doesn't always talk about just fitness and just strength training. He talks about a lot of artistry and creativity, so a holistic approach to health and happiness. So I've given the listener a little bit of an introduction. Elliott, did you want to fill in that story there with some more complete details, mate?
Well, it's funny. I actually just recorded and uploaded a video yesterday about a man who had been training for many years and getting great results. And apparently he injured his back pretty bad. And the doctor told him that he would never be able to squat and deadlift again. And those are pretty, staple exercises in most exercise routines. And he writes to me and he says, basically I was answering his question in the video. He writes to me and says, Elliott, I can't exercise this way any longer, but yet I still want to become the strongest version of myself. And that's basically been my term to describe what, in other words, is fulfilling your destiny, becoming the best you possibly can in the subjective way that you feel fit. And he says, I can't squat and deadlift anymore. How am I going to do this? And I had to remind everybody that watches my channel that becoming the strongest version of yourself, reaching your form of heaven or nirvana or enlightenment or whatever it is that you want to describe your full actualization, I guess Maslow would call it, doesn't require that you follow my method. In fact, it doesn't require that you follow any method that anybody has ever prescribed for you, because your journey is unique. The way you reach the inner is only done by one method, and that is your method. It's a completely subjective experience. So although many of the things I talk about revolve around my way of finding myself and building my self-esteem and becoming the strongest version of myself, and it also happens to be the one that a lot of young people who gravitate towards me because of, doesn't mean that, in fact, it doesn't not only not mean that it's unimportant that you do the things that I do, but quite frankly, there are 1,000 different ways that it can be done. Yeah, and that's really it. The things that I find interesting that have supported me in becoming the strongest version of myself isn't gospel. It isn't just the one and only way to make things happen, to reach your self-actualization. And that's really what my mission is in supporting especially young men in becoming the strongest version of themselves in multiple regards, in a holistic fashion, if you will.
That's excellent, Elliott, and thanks for that. Just to maybe jump into one of the first things that I wanted to speak to, you have spoken to it a little bit already, and that's a particular statement that you have on your website at hulsestrength.com, and that is it says, "This is a holistic approach to health, strength, and happiness. You either get it or you don't." Is that what exactly, I guess, was your initial intention by saying that? And for the people that aren't aware of you or haven't heard you before, what does that mean to you particularly? Because I think that that's something that, as the call progresses, the listener will get to know that you're very much an individual in the health space, but you also don't force your opinion on people. So is that statement still as applicable as maybe when you first put it up there?
Well, I guess the most important part of that statement, and I think the one that you're really asking me, is you either get it or you don't.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it's sort of a call to action. It's a little bit of a stance, but essentially, I'm not in the business of trying to convince anybody. I've been around long enough to realize that there are some people that are that you're going to vibrate with. The vibes are right. You're going to resonate, in other words, with some people, and some people you're just going to clash with. It just doesn't work out well. And I think we live in a day and age, really, and in a time where everyone's trying to prove themselves to everyone else, and we go to great lengths to prove things through scientific study and experiments, and people go to great lengths to accumulate resources to justify their position. And I'm really not interested in doing any of that. I find that I'm more of a poet than I am a scientist, and I don't come with a means or a desire to be right, to prove anything. More, it's my desire to share an experience and to invite you to experience yours as well.
Awesome. Has that always been there for you, do you think? Because I know that I've heard you mention that you had an uncle, I think, that might have come to live with you at one point, and he was kind of a bit of a free spirit and also a strength trainer and had his own thing going on. Have you always maybe had that artistry to what you've been trying to do, or that intention? Has that been there since day one, do you think, or has that blossomed over time as everything's grown?
Oh man, it's part nature, part nurture. One part of it that I recently discovered in myself, because I'm always self-reflecting. I guess you could say it's kind of egocentric, but I'm always thinking about myself. And I'm like, why do I think the way I do? Why do I do the things that I do? Why are the things that motivate me? Why do the things that motivate me? I'm always in this self-questioning place, never settled. And one of the things that I've come to discover, namely because I heard someone else say it and I realized, that describes a lot about me, is that I grew up what you would call a hyperactive attention deficit child. That's what they would have called me. Is what they called me. In fact, during the experimental years of the medication that they now just easily prescribe to every single kid that doesn't want to follow directions, that is when I came up. Ritalin just first came out, and I think I was probably one of the guinea pigs that they gave it to. What the individual that I listened to his podcast, I think, or read his book said was that many of the free thinkers today, many of the people who are deep questioners and rebels in a way, and those who are willing to step outside the box, are children that were in a way rejected at a very early age, that are now adults, and they were never really allowed inside the box, so they never really cared about getting kicked out of it. And I kind of feel that way. I kind of feel like I was never really allowed in any box at all because I just didn't fit in. And as an adult, it's very easy for me. I could say that I'm courageous in my ability to question and to act, but really, there's not as much courage as I once thought there was, because I was never really ego identified with any particular praiseworthy behavior or ideal. I was essentially rejected to begin with, and I decided, well, I'm just, I've got a strong self-esteem. I don't give a shit if you guys reject me. I'm just going to do what I want to do. And that's kind of been my attitude about basically everything. The rejection of authority, the questioning of religion and politics. And it's because I was never invited to begin with. So on the outside, it's very easy to question.
That was awesome. How in depth is that process now of self-reflection, do you think, compared to maybe what it used to be? Are you more aware of how to get the best out of yourself when you are self-reflecting? Because, I mean, that takes a lot of awareness to even look inside, let alone to recognize maybe that there's not so much courage involved because you weren't exactly inside the box. And I think everyone who knows your material knows that you live a little bit outside the box, and that's probably why people gravitate to it. Has there been a development process in that, self-reflection process?
It's a good question. It starts out when we're young, and I think we all sort of go through the dilemma of where do I fit in? I think that's just kind of human across the board. It may have been a bit more potent for me because my character never really fit in very well. and also the way I look never fit in really well. I lived in a suburb of New York City where it was very clear who was black and who was white, and the liberal North likes to try and behave as if they're so progressive, but the socioeconomic racism and segregation really up there is probably a far more insidious than it is even down south, and it's all socioeconomical. So you can have literally a mansion and walk just a few blocks and have a crack house. So although everyone lived on top of one another to a degree, the delineation between who was who is very clear. The contrast is stark. And because it's such a melting pot, you've got, you don't just have black and white, like, in certain parts of the country. You've got Italian, you've got Jewish, you've got Irish, and then you've got Greeks. And then you've got Haitians and Jamaicans and Puerto Ricans. So you've got so many different people. And I, coming from a family that is from Belize, where, at the time, no one even knew that country existed. And then being of racial ambiguity, not necessarily like, I'm not really so black, I'm not really so white. And I don't speak Spanish, but I look like I'm Puerto Rican, never really fitting in. So it was a deeper dilemma for me than it was, I think, for most kids that were like, where do I fit in? Like, most of the kids is like, well, I can't afford designer jeans, so am I a poor kid? Or you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Do I smoke weed, or am I a jock? There was kind of like, it was a bit more superficial. Am I an artist or am I a jock? Which one am I? For me, it was like, who am I at the core? So the question struck far deeper for me, and the wrestling was probably a bit, I can only speak for myself and make assumptions based on what I've experienced. But I bet the wrestling, I would assume that the wrestling was a lot deeper for me, and that's no longer the case. In fact, like, I've come to embrace. I'm so grateful for the ambiguity in with regard to even my, my mental capacity. It was like, is this kid stupid? Like, he can't sit down, he can't shut up. He's a distraction. Like, he doesn't do well in his tests. All those things that really hurt as a child, like, you don't fit in and you're stupid, kind of gave me free license to be who I am as an adult now. So the struggle is not so much who am I any longer, and it's definitely not how do I accept myself any longer. I think the struggle at this point, the self-reflection is more of, really, how can I put away all of the tools and behaviors, activities, all of the stirring in my consciousness that I had to use to get to where I am right now, and realize they're no longer resourceful, and relax into my consciousness, relax into my being. Does that make sense, without trying not to be so neurotic any longer?
Now, that's fantastic. So not only have you made that process of self-reflection, you've reached a point where you're, I guess, trying to let it go. So it's just more natural, I guess, from this point on. I mean, that's probably even more eloquent an answer than I was looking for, to be honest, Elliott. Thanks so much for that. And just, I guess, coming from my point of view, it's really hard for me, not being from America and not being from that kind of population with that mix of different races. It's probably hard for me to completely identify with what that must have been like. But I just wanted to say thanks for just sharing that. I like when things come out on the show that maybe are a little bit universal, and it can teach, particularly part of my audience is Australian. They might not realise that places in the north are like that in America still. So thank you so much for sharing that. It's a good bit of knowledge there. Just moving on. I remember that you did an episode with David Siteman Garland, which might have been where I first came across you. And then shortly after that, my housemate Jack, who is a massive fan of your YouTube channel, he's been embracing a lot of your stuff for a couple of years, I think. You spoke to David Siteman Garland about feeling more like an artist and less like a marketer these days. And obviously you're a great trainer and you've had a lot of success. And I mean, there's a bunch of other shows people can probably go and find out that. If you really want to know how Elliott's built his business, maybe go check out that Rise to the Top episode, because that pretty much is a distillation of all those things. How do you find the balance between being a trainer, obviously you train in person, I'm assuming, with your business there as well, with certain clients, being a family man, and also having this internet personality that's probably very demanding on you and very demanding on your time? Is that hard to get that division of time, or have you just do you find like a hard line on different things as far as what you'll commit to?
I'm in the process of stripping. I'm simplifying. I think my motto, get rid of and simplify. Really, that was my idea for this year as I was creating 2013. It really was simplify and minimize and simplify. I think that was it. Get rid of things and make things simple. Again, the struggle now at this particular point in my life, and I know a lot of people aren't there yet, so I don't speak too much to it, but it's a matter of how can I do less and breathe and enjoy more instead of piling on more things so that I become more busy. And so potentially I could earn more or be more famous or whatever the world has you believe you should aspire to. But really, I find that that's nothing more than more neurotic drive, more of trying to prove yourself, more of trying to find yourself or to justify your being. And I'm no longer interested in that. Does this make sense?
Yeah, definitely.
So right now, what I've done is I slowly, and I'm continuing to slowly get rid of activity. I'm just getting rid of activity. And really, this might sound strange, but the more I get rid of activity, the more I'm relaxed enough to take real action. And real action means that it's coming from my heart. So I'm only doing the things that I love doing the most, and I'm doing it with the greatest focus and concentration that I possibly can. And it revolves around two things. And really, they sound like two things, but they're just two different ways that I'm magnifying my ability to serve from my experiences and who I am. Number one is my family, my children. And that's probably the most difficult task, and it's the one that means the most to me, and it's probably the one that I'm dropping the ball the most on, because I think if any parents are listening to this, we always think that, boy, I could do more, I could do more, I could do more, and that takes a significant portion of my energy, my mental, my emotional, and my physical energy. And the other one is mentorship to literally the hundreds of thousands, maybe pretty close to 1 million young men and even some women and older guys that listen to my rants. They watch my videos. As I move along this path of becoming who I am and I share my insights and experiences, it's just a matter of how can I do a better job at touching their minds and hearts and supporting them as they develop and they go through a lot of the same struggles that I have gone through, and being not just an ear, but also sort of a signpost as an encouragement.
How much of yourself do you commit to? Because I know you have, just for example, a massively popular Facebook channel when you syndicate your videos out, just as one example. How much of yourself do you give time-wise to answering, just say, comments or questions that come up in that sort of stuff? Or is it just pretty much reached a point? Because I know I've seen those comment threads. They get up to hundreds and hundreds of comments sometimes in a very short amount of time. How do you know where to draw that line? Because I'm sure that there are other people that are building platforms and personal brands and all that sort of stuff, which is part of what you do, that probably are having that same difficulty. That would be good to just know. How do you make the decision? I'm going to jump in and answer that question, or I'm going to take part in this conversation and maybe not another conversation.
Well, first of all, it depends on my mood. And earlier on, my mood was more aggressive, and I just I had to prove myself. And this was probably a couple of years ago. I go on there and if somebody attacked me or had a question that kind of just argued with me, and I'd go in and I'd have to prove what I'm saying, or I'd have to be more eloquent than that individual. No, I no longer feel the urge to do that. If anything, there's this sense of me responding simply so that people know that I'm there. But I upload 2-3 videos a day sometimes, so they know I'm here. And I do, when I get the opportunity, scroll through and read the comments. But if you're listening to this and you're in a very similar situation where you're starting to grow and on social media, and you got your Twitter, you got your Facebook, you got YouTube comments, and you got people telling you you should feel obligated to answering these comments and reading them, and people like you don't want to be a douchebag by not answering them or not reading them. There's something that I use. There's the story that I tell myself, because really that's what we're all doing. A story that I tell myself that consoles me in a way when it comes to this. And it is like you alluded to earlier, that really, if you're a content producer, you are an artist, and your art will suffer. Imagine like if Picasso or even like writers, I think of Ralph Waldo Emerson. If every time they wrote something, within 20 minutes they were getting critiqued and feedback right away, their art would suffer, because not only would they would adjust their art, number one, towards where they're getting the accolades. Wow, we really like this poem. We really like this essay. We really like this painting. And then what happens is it alters the consciousness of the artist, such that when he does want to allow the muse, the spirit, to move through him in order to produce the next piece, it's sullied with the opinions of people who only meant well. Well, I really like when you do this. So what's going to happen is he's going to go and try to produce an authentic piece, but it's going to be colored by the feedback that was just too premature. You can't develop as an artist if everything you do gets instant feedback. And then it goes on the negative side as well. You start to question yourself. I'm an artist. This is my piece of art. This is the pure expression of who I am as a human being. And here comes somebody who shits on it. You start questioning yourself. And it's not fair to you. It's not fair to people who could potentially benefit from your art. And it's definitely not fair to the spirit or the muse or the universe or God or Allah as it's moving through you in order to produce this piece. So that being said, it's not easy, but it's easier said than done. But we've got to, in a way, remove ourselves from the feedback in order to serve the people that are giving you the feedback. Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense. And just in a small microcosm of my world, which I'm a musician part-time, I see a lot of musicians going out there, and I'm sure you would probably have some musicians or artists floating around your social media streams as well. They'll write a song or a riff or a vocal, or it could be a rhyme, or they make a little video of them playing a guitar solo or something, and they throw it straight up online before they've really done the work. And they get absolutely hammered for it. And I just feel for them so much that if they had have just kept that to themselves, really embraced that piece of art, made sure it was actually good, that also helps, because sometimes you just write things or create things that you think are great at the time and rush them out there and they're not quite what they could be. But I see that happening all the time. And then a lot of disappointed young musicians, because I can only speak to that directly in this case, are throwing things online and having their artistry really held back, as you said. I mean, you put that so well, that if you put things out into the world and you're not ready for the feedback, or you really don't want the feedback, because that's something that you seem to embrace, is that you love the fact that your community talks back to you, whether it's negative or not. And I know a lot of people aren't like that. So I guess that's a reflection on your character. But yeah, so that's, I guess that's my little soliloquy there, but just moving on. Thanks so much for articulating the artistry thing there, Elliott.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just wanted to just move on, and it's probably a good way to move into this conversation. You tend to put things out into the world, I guess, that you have admitted yourself are entirely you, and probably became more and more you over time. And just to reflect back on that last question, do you feel like maybe now that you're comfortable in yourself, as you mentioned, and you really feel like you've reached that point as being an artist more so than a marketer or just a strength trainer, that what you're putting out into the world may be a solid enough reflection of yourself that you don't need to maybe defend it like you used to, that it is basically, it is what it's meant to be?
It's funny, and this might be the first time I'm admitting this to anyone, but my art isn't the content that I provide. And that's why when someone attacks the content, I really am pretty detached from it. Now, that sounds strange because a lot of people think that they listen to me because my content is so good. Like, man, like this guy really has a lot of good things to say. I know that's not my art because there are other people who say the same thing. The things that I say are you can find in great books. You can find it in Wikipedia. You can find it online in many different ways. I'm not the producer of this content. My art is the presentation of the content. Do you see?
Yeah.
So it's not the content, it's the context by which I bring it. So When I say that I'm not really being myself, or that there were times when I would make something and I know that it wasn't a good piece. It's less of what people are actually thinking I mean. They think I mean like I didn't say a good thing. So I've remade videos where I basically said the same thing, but I said it in a different way. And it's because it's the way I share it that is authentic. If I'm grounded, if I'm breathing deeply, if I'm focused on the moment and come from a pure intent, a pure sentiment of serving the person that I'm answering the question for, no matter what I say, it's right because it's coming from a pure sentiment. So that's where really the biggest critic is myself. Does this make sense? Am I answering your question?
Oh, that was perfect. Oh, sorry, I was just reflecting on what you said there. It was really well said. And maybe just to really dig down on that, you feel as though maybe, I guess, when in the world of particularly when you're talking specifically to strength training, there probably is only so many right ways to do that. And
right.
Yeah, and I guess the delivery really is where you differentiate yourself, because, I mean, that's why I was, and my housemate, that's why we got into your stuff, because you had just such a unique way, an artistic way. Me being a musician, I think that maybe that resonated with me on some level without realizing. And do you think that that's something that you are now fully comfortable with, or is it something you're still trying to articulate and work on that artistry, or maybe getting into that place that you just talked about where you're really grounded? Is it something that still can just run away on you on random occasions and you don't feel it?
Here's the thing. It's funny. It's not so much a development of skill any longer. It's how can I get in the right place before I create this presentation? You see, it's not so much. In fact, the more I go to my head, the more I go to technique, the more I go to trying to redo great performances, the more I screw it up. The more I breathe and let go and allow the thing to happen through me, the better the offer that I make. So the craft, the skill for me is how can I get out of my own way and allow this magical thing to happen? And it's literally how I produce some of my greatest pieces is I am not there. It's literally happening through me. I watch some of my old videos and I shake my head and I'm like, oh my God, how did I do that? Like, where did that come from? And this is when I get in trouble. How can I reproduce that? Now that's when I start going to my head and I got to realize you can't do that. I've got to come authentic every single moment that I offer what I offer.
So basically you're saying that it's really hard to replicate inspiration, I guess. Is that a lay way maybe of saying that?
Yeah, absolutely. That's the perfect word, inspiration. And inspiration is it's funny, inspiration and expiration, because what I'm physically doing is expiring. I'm letting it out. But the inspiration is coming from a different source. I'll use the term muse. It's coming from a spiritual source. It's coming from another source that's not my physical body. And when I get in front of the camera, I'm literally breathing it out. Now, literally, it's figurative. We're using this as a metaphor, but literally, in order for that inspiration and expiration to be as soft and flowing as possible, because really that's what it is, it's a flow, I have to have soft muscles. I've got to be relaxed in my breathing. I've got to be relaxed in my body. I've got to be centered. I've got to be grounded. Do you see what I'm saying? So it's a process of physical exercise. It's a process of getting my body ready to allow the music to come through me.
Very well said, mate. That was fantastic. Just for the Braver by the Day audience, they know that I ask every guest one particular question, or at least I try to, depending on time. And I think I've got about 10 minutes-ish left with Elliott. If that's cool,
that's fine.
I'll ask you the question I ask everyone, and then I've been trying to finish up the episodes on more of a light note, because this next question is quite heavy, and I've got a few quick and fun facts I wanted to ask you at the end. So,
sure.
The question I ask all my guests: how do you best deal with the fear of failure in your own business and maybe body and with clients and all those things? And what advice would you give to a client or a customer or even a friend that's maybe having some questions about making a major habit change in their life? Because, I mean, that's essentially part of your audience, I'm assuming, are people that maybe you're the first person they've found in the fitness world and they gravitate to your material, but they're about to make a big change, maybe from being unfit to fit, or from doing CrossFit to doing strength training. Is there fear involved in those transitions in your mind, and how do you help people get over that?
Well, here's the harsh language that I use that resonates with a lot of the young people that come to me, and a lot of it is centers around physical culture. But I would use the same sentiment when talking to anyone, and it really is: go and fail, go and screw it up, go and make a mistake, go and scrape your knees and eat some dirt, go and experience all that you're afraid of. That thing, like, build it up in your head, like really embellish. So, okay, so you're afraid to move out of your parents' house and move on your own. Good. That's great. Now, imagine what's the worst, like literally, like make it up in your head, like as bad as it can. What's the worst that will happen if you move out of your parents' house? Okay, cool. So, well, it'd be really bad if I live in my car. Great. Let's go even further. Like, what if all the windows in your car broke and it rained on you? Yeah, that would fucking suck. Okay, great. What about, like, you don't have any food and you have to go out with your baseball cap and you have to ask people for dollars and change coming out of the store so that you can buy a sandwich during the day? Oh, yeah, okay, that would suck too. Okay, great. And let's say you broke your foot and you had to do this all while you're on crutches. Oh, man, that would suck. And let's say you fell off the crutches and you knocked out one of your teeth. Okay, man, that's really fucking bad. Do you think you could handle that? Like, do you think you would completely combust, or would you figure it out? Well, I mean, that sounds pretty shitty. It sounds like it sucks. I prefer not to experience that, but I think I could handle it. Most of the time, you're going to say that to yourself. Most people that I talk to, and of course, I really just exaggerated. I mean, it could never really get that bad, but yeah. Let's say it could. Like, dude, do you think you could handle that? Like, do you think you could dig your way out of that? Yeah, I probably could. And that's the worst that could happen? Yeah, well, then go do that shit. Just go. All of our fears stand in front of us, and they're not that fucking scary. So go and do the scariest thing that you could possibly do, and you'll realize, that really wasn't that bad, now was it?
That was really, really well said, mate. Thank you for that. That's probably the most direct answer I've had to that question, if nothing else. So, and that you think that applies to not just, you would use that same tone with maybe someone closer to you, do you think, that had a personal relationship with you?
Oh, absolutely. And I have children, and I know that I'm gonna come up against a situation where one of my children are gonna want to do something, and I have to be honest with them and say, look, you've got to go do it, and if you hurt yourself, you've got to be okay with that, because here's the thing: we all want to safely float towards our vision in life. We all have an ideal in our mind about what we would like, who we would like to be, what we would like to experience, what we'd like to have. We all have this in some way, shape, or form. What we don't realize is that happens through challenge. You don't get that by floating on a cloud. That doesn't happen on smooth roads. That doesn't happen by following the well-trodden path that's been laid out that everyone else has followed. Everyone else follows that path that's been well-trodden, and they get to the same place, and they all have midlife crises and end up on pills and die and regret their entire lives. You've got to go into that jungle with a machete. Yeah, you might cut yourself. Yeah, insects might bite you and you might get Lyme disease and lose a leg. Yeah, there might be tigers in there. Yeah, you might get scraped and your eye might get poked out by a branch. But you still have to fucking do that, because it is your responsibility to go through the challenges in order to gain the goal. See, you're going somewhere completely different that no one else has been, because what you envision for yourself has never been envisioned before by anybody else. We're all so unique in that particular way. But you're going to only get what everybody else gets if you go down that easy path. Go and do the hard thing. And don't be afraid to screw yourself up. I'd rather die making mistakes. I'd rather die making genuine mistakes, authentic mistakes that came from my core. And I wouldn't even call them mistakes, but the world might call them mistakes because the result isn't what they think is successful. I'd rather die in that way than to live on my knees or to live crawling down this easy, well-trodden path as a slave in the same way that everybody else has done. I don't want to eat. If it means that I don't eat, then I won't eat. But I'm not doing it. I'm not falling into line.
That's bloody well said, mate. That's excellent. And I think you might have said at some point in the past, there's nothing more subversive than mediocrity. I think that might have been one of your quotes or something very similar. So I definitely agree with you there. And if I just wanted to fire off these quick and fun facts just to maybe end on a slightly lighter note, if you're still cool with that, Elliott. They'll only take a few seconds. So
Sure.
I tried to tailor these. I've only done this for a few episodes. I try to tailor them to maybe suit the person that I am speaking to, because I try to learn as much about them as I can. So, number one, what's your favorite music to work out to? Either a genre or a band?
You're going to hate this, but I don't listen to music when I work out. I stop completely. I want to, training is my meditation, and music is just a distraction. I want to be with myself. I want to be with the barbell. I want to be with my training partners, and music just drowns all that out.
Very well said. I know that I got obsessed with Audible books for a long time, and I think it was distracting me when I was training too. So, which TV show do you secretly enjoy, but tell your friends and family that you don't like at all?
I'm such a bore, dude. I'm such a bore. I haven't watched a TV show. I can't even tell you the last time I watched a TV show. I have no clue. But I can tell you when I did watch TV, I really enjoyed watching reruns of Seinfeld.
Excellent.
And that's really it.
That's fine. I think not watching TV is probably a good thing. Is there any type of food that you eat because you know it's really healthy, but you really just don't like it all?
No.
No?
I mean, I get sick of eating broccoli. Like when I'm really trying to get lean, I end up eating lots and lots and lots of broccoli, and I get sick of it. I don't hate broccoli. I just get sick of it, but I eat it because I know it's helpful to me. But if I take a break from it, I'll come back and I enjoy it. So.
Excellent. I know that you love books and you often reference books, and it's probably what sets you apart, in my mind, even more so from other strength trainers, particularly on YouTube. And that's, what's the best book that you've read in the past few years from any genre, fiction, non-fiction, or whatever?
Well, I keep going back to, and I'm revisiting even right now, the writings of Ralph Waldo Emerson. And for some reason, I feel such a kindred, like we're kindred spirits. I feel such a connection to him. We're different in so many different ways. I mean, he was a Harvard graduate. He grew up in the 1800s. I mean, his brothers died of tuberculosis. I mean, so different. But I think that he offered me permission to ask questions and to trust my own mind. I think what Emerson does is he allows you to be yourself and to trust yourself and to know that no matter what anybody else says, it's right and it's okay. And in fact, it's your genius and you should embrace it.
That's excellent. I actually am a big fan of Seneca, and that shit's like 2,000 years old. So,
yeah.
Any plans to start an audio version or audio podcast of your materials? Because I guess it is one of the hot things. I've been doing it for a few years, but I have noticed a lot of people are re-syndicating their audio. Just for anyone who's listening now that maybe isn't a big YouTuber but is a big podcast fan, are you ever going to chuck your stuff into an audio stream, do you think?
No, like I said before, simplify, simplify, simplify is my motto. And to add anything, I'm getting lots of incredible offers. I mean, right now, actually tomorrow, I'll have a talk with a guy who wants to start a television show about me. And I'm really tiptoeish about it. I'm like, yeah, that sounds good. But I'm like, it's going to take me away from my core. It's going to take me away from my family. It's going to take me away from my videos. And really, my life is of course, I'm always up for the challenge. But my life is perfect right now. I could live perhaps for the next 10 years. I don't know. I say this now. Making videos, and that's it. Like I'm good with this. I'm happy. I don't want to add anything else.
Sounds like a great place to be. And finally, this is a bit of a left field question. What's your favorite sporting rivalry, either international or just American based?
Dude, I don't know how to tell you this. I'm so I'm so boring, dude. I don't watch sports. I don't fucking know who was in the Super Bowl last year. I have no clue about anything. I mean, I could sit here and make something up, but like
What about boxing? You a boxing fan? There's a lot of great rivalries in boxing.
nothing, nothing. I just
Nothing.
like I don't have time for entertainment. I don't know. That's like all entertainment, pop culture stuff. I don't want to sound like, here I'm sounding like arrogant, like kind of like priggish, like, oh, you guys are interested in. I think it's cool. In fact, like I wish I have friends who are like highly emotionally enrolled in like the results of these games and stuff, and I'm like I'm a little envious because I'm like I get it. It's like that's cool. Like there's an emotional roller coaster associated with it, but it doesn't do it for me. It doesn't mean that I'm better than anyone. I hate to come off that way, but it's just like I just don't fucking have time or interest in that shit. Sorry.
Yeah. No, that's fine. These are just random questions.
Yeah,
so
I get it.
I guess you might be the only guy that ever says you don't have a sporting rivalry, so that's a good thing.
Yeah, give a shit.
Just to put something, you're from Florida, so I think there's something to do with the Florida Gators.
Oh yeah, let me tell you, I took my family to Georgia for vacation over the summer, and when you're on vacation, I think it was a couple of weeks, and you need a haircut, and I'm not going to get a haircut out there. I'll wait till I get home, but I didn't have a hat, so we were somewhere, and I bought a Georgia hat. I bought the Georgia hat because it fit right and it looked cool. I was like, that's a cool friggin' hat. So I put on this Georgia hat, and I'm like, I don't think anything of it. It's just got a G. I don't even know like what college it is. It's just like I figured it's some kind of Georgia college. And I come home and I'm wearing the hat, and like I'm getting attacked all over the place, and people are like boo, like booing at me. And I have some friend like he comes up to me and he's like, "Dude, don't ever wear that hat around me again." I'm like, "What the fuck are you talking about, bro? It's a hat with a G on it. I just thought it looked cool." He's like, because they're all Gator fans. And I'm like, you guys are sick.
Yeah. As an Australian, it's really hard to understand the level of intensity about college sport in Australia. Yeah, in America, it just blows my mind a little bit, to be honest. So,
yeah, me too.
Anyway, Elliott, you've been so generous with your time today, and really, really honest. So, thanks so much for that, and thank you for just joining me on the call. And it's been a real pleasure for me. And I know that my housemate in particular will be absolutely flogging this episode around because he is a big fan of yours. So did you want to leave the audience maybe with one extra piece of advice from the StrengthCamp camp, so to speak, and then we might say goodbye?
I guess the one thing, the one invitation that I always offer people, and do what you want with it. It sounds cliche, but it probably is the most powerful thing you'll ever hear. And it's an invitation to trust yourself no matter what, even if you have to take that to your grave. Trust your heart, trust your body, and don't let anybody sway you from that. Don't let any distraction sway you from that.
Excellent way to finish. Well, thanks, Elliott, and I guess I'll let you know when the episode's out. And yeah, thank you once again for just joining me. It's been a real pleasure. You're one of my big online mentors, and yeah, I always look to your stuff for a bit of extra pump up when I'm feeling a bit down with my exercise. So thanks for that on a personal level.
That's awesome, Joshua. I appreciate it, man. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you. I'll see you later.
Bye.